Yeah, the here's the issue that I'm facing when it comes to memory problems. When it comes to facing like memory problems when it comes to video games is there is like one old arcade video game that was a fighting game for either the Super Nintendo or the Nintendo 64. And, well, it's a fighting game where you could just jump into the background and fight, or jump into the forefront and fight as well. And yeah, that one particular arcade fighting game where it's like a side-scrolling type of video game where you could just jump into the background and fight, and or jump back into the forefront and fight. And also there's like a couple of first-person shooter games. One that was for the PS1, and in a couple of cutscenes. One where it's like all dark and dim and poorly lit, and it was like I faintly remember a quote that goes like something like this. I don't know. I lost a lot of friends when the main character was talking to another character, and then ends up going into a small little warehouse, and on the balcony where he was crouched and looking onward in a somewhat brightly lit but still pretty dimly lit warehouse full of enemies. I don't remember what that game is called. I only remember those two things. And I remember playing it. And I remember running out of ammunition for the pistol and the assault rifle. And another first-person shooter game. It was from Ubisoft, and it was in the Rainbow Six type of game, and it was a first-person shooter Ubisoft game, and you could pretty much shoot your teammates, and they would respond with the quote "friendly fire" every time you shot your teammates. And it was about going and stopping terrorists and going through an alleyway to get to the hostages, to free up the hostages from the very terrorists somewhere in Europe. or Europe, America adjacent. And it was like on like a PS2 disc that housed other demos, or a demo, like a super demo disc for the PlayStation 2. I don't remember what it was called. I only remember playing a small part of it. And that was the very game. And also there was this 3D free roamed out like an amusement park type of Crash Bandicoot game where you could like go into first person and back into third person whenever you want. And you could pretty much beat up any of the very characters, and they would have quotes to the attacks or your presence being around. And I remember playing a little bit of that because that was also a demo. But I'd like to know what the titles were of those games. Because I, for the life of me, can't remember the titles of those games. Because, frankly, there are way too many, and I mean way too many video games out there. Like, way too many video games out there for me to remember every single one of them. Like, seriously. It is hard to remember every single motherfucking video game out there. But I do distinctly remember Power Rangers having an arcade fighting game. And there's like one particular female villain that looks like a neon pink and blue looking lipstick looking chick that looks like a humanoid personified makeup product. And she was a villain. One of the villains from the franchise. But also there was like a computer game that was just like the old Mortal Kombat games, but every single character was generic as fuck. Not even mirroring that of the Mortal Kombat characters at all. They did not have any recognizable or poorly attempted to be recognizable like outfits or some shit. And it was a computer game. And every dude was wearing shorts and not much else, with very short hair, and killing each other on screen. And it was like a Mortal Kombat game, but except it wasn't Mortal Kombat at all. And I was like thinking to myself, wow. And after a while of like trying to remember like those horror rail shooter games that were arcade rail shooter games that were all horror themed. I now remember them. Carnival, which was a horror rail shooter arcade, and House of the Dead, which is another horror rail shooter. I've played a lot of video games in my life, but I've never even contemplated on like looking at the title and paying attention to the name of the title of the games. I used to just pop any old motherfucking video game in and play it. But there is King of Fighters, and there is like this whole there's this niche video game called Killer Instinct. It's not one of those insanely popular fighting games, but it's a niche one. And I'm just having like memory problems to the point where it's hard for me to remember every single video game I've ever played. I mean, I remember playing a lot of video games, like a lot of them. And one of those video games that stuck with me was Mortal Kombat Mythologies. I mean, Mortal Kombat is a pretty well recognizable video game franchise because it's insanely popular. It is a narrative heavy, insanely popular fighting game. Just like Dead or Alive, it is one of those popular fighting games that is insanely popular. Like, seriously, insanely popular. And I've also remembered playing Call of Duty The Finest Hour. Albeit that you couldn't shoot your squad mates back in those days when I was playing that game. And that was my first ever, my literal first ever introduction to the Call of Duty franchise, and it was back on the PS2. And I also played Medal of Honor. And Medal of Honor was actually a good video game. Still remember that the ambient noise or the ambient sound from the very beginning of the game. I also played Shell Shocked, which was another military video game, and it was a World War II video game that was taking liberties of the America versus Japan war, the latter half of World War II. And I just cannot, for the life of me, remember a first-person shooter Ubisoft game that you could like shoot your teammates. And if you shoot one of your teammates too much, one of your teammates dies, and the rest of the team can continue on. I can't for the life of me remember that kind of that game, but it was by Ubisoft. Speaking about video games, I'm wondering when they're going to ever do a reboot, a good, faithful to the source material reboot of Zombies Ate My Neighbors, where it's all third person, where it's a good, justified, and faithful to the original type of reboot or remastered or a definitive edition to the original game. Or if not, a sequel to that game. And I remember playing like a Power Rangers side-scrolling beat-em-up game. I remember playing that one. Like, seriously. Like, I would love for there to be some way of knowing when each of those games came out, or like games that are in fact the games that I just mentioned, because I'm having a hard time remembering them, for real.